Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. And before we dive in, could you tell me about yourself?
Hi, I'm glad to be here. My name is Chris Ha. I am the Kimmins 8th grade band director, and I'm also the Northside High School jazz band director. I graduated from UAFS in 2016, and I just finished up year 4 of teaching.
UAFS, that's what I'm talking about.
Woot woot.
So which year did you just finish? I'm sorry.
This is year 4.
Year 4. Man, that's awesome.
Time flies.
So in that 4 years, can you tell me what your students have been up to? Like, what are some of your accomplishments?
One of the biggest highlights of my career so far has been being an exhibition band at the Arkansas All-State Conference. This happened in my second year of teaching. And so my first year of teaching, I submitted recording of my band to be selected by a panel of out-of-state judges. My band was chosen, and that was crazy. And so then the next year, it was kind of sad because the group that won the position is not the group that gets to go.
Yeah.
So, but the next year, I worked up a concert with my 8th graders, and then we got to perform in front of a whole bunch of band directors from across the state and other student interns at our state level conference, our all-state conference. Yes. So
go ahead.
I was saying, it was just that was a really fun time. Stressful, but a lot of fun and a huge learning experience for me.
I can't even imagine. You're talking about like one of the pinnacle steps of a band director's career is to present your band in an honor band position at a conference for band. It's like band, you know?
Yeah.
And as a first year teacher submitting something like that, having the confidence to do that, I think that's really excellent. So good for you. Let's stay on that for just a second. Can you just describe to me what it was like being a second year teacher and looking out there and being like, what is happening? Like how did this happen? Like, how did you feel?
At that point, I had been wrestling with all the emotions of, oh my gosh, I'm performing in an audience of band directors who have had years of experience, and there's student interns who probably want to be where I am at right now.
Yeah.
And I know that there's people who probably submitted too and thinking it's like, oh, well, this kid is the one who, got the the spot instead of me. And I don't know, but in a way, when I was there at the venue with all my students and all the hard work that we had put in, there was kind of like that Zen like focus, like it's go time. It's, there. So I was oddly calm because for the months prior, I had been freaking out about it leading up to the event. But once we were there, I was like, it's go time. I'm going to put faith in the work that I've put in and all my kids have put in. Put faith in the adjunct instructors that came in to help and all the mentorship that I received in the months coming into that. And I was like, I don't want to ruin my moment by just being super scared. Let's go make some music. Wow. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, just to have that Zen focus too, and to hone it in like that, that's not easy to do. And so I think maybe a lot of that, has to do with your personality and where you come from and things like that. But we can talk about that later. Can we talk now a little bit about your team? So one thing I think that's really special about the Fort Smith area, I know there's two sides of town. There's the south side and the north side, and you teach on the north side, but you team teach. And I think that is something really special and definitely helps kind of zen you in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have these decades of people helping you out. So could you talk a little bit about your team?
Yeah, so the Northside team, there's 6 of us between Northside High School, Kimmins Junior High, and Darby Junior High. There are 2 directors at each campus. The assistant at Darby is also an assistant at Northside, so she splits up her time as well. Our team is super unique in that we don't change members very often. The 3 oldest members of the team have been in the Fort Smith system four oldest members have been in the system for over 10 years. They've been working together as a group. The assistant at Darby and my position, we're the young kiddos on the team. But even still, we have such a really great working dynamic. And we have a range of personalities that we work really well. We don't always agree. We might even get on each other's nerves sometimes, but it's always in the best interest of the kids. And that's our common goal. Also with the team, we also have a very unique spread of specialties. We've got a high brass specialist, a low brass specialist. We've got 3 woodwind players. One's a double reed, which those are like unicorns. and I happen to be a percussionist. And so with that spread, we can hit every single instrument group, which is something that is kind of rare too in a big team situation like that, where we have every instrument group covered with someone who majored in that instrument.
Yeah, that is something special. Can you talk a little bit about the demographic of your students and a little bit about what makes them so special?
Yeah, so the north side of town is also known as the poor side of town. Darby and Kimmins have about 90% free and reduced lunch. Darby has closer to 100% free and reduced lunch, and Kimmins is right there with it. And what that means is our demographic is high poverty. It doesn't mean that every kid is high poverty, but a huge majority of them do live in situations where money is tight. Oftentimes, they are also working alongside their parents on weekends, either or under the table cash, and also looking after younger siblings because mom and dad have to work a second job or working the graveyard shift, and so that's the situation for a lot of our students.
Yeah.
And and the reason why our kids that we're so proud and the reason why our system is so unique is because in spite of all those challenges, the kids still find a way to make things work. They still find a way to show up to their extracurricular practices. They still are high achieving individually on our regional competition and the state level. And despite all the challenges that face them, they rise up and beyond the expectation every year.
That's evident. You're talking about after a first year of being with you, these kids are already winning a major achievement that some of them will remember that until forever, And so that's really special. So thank you for sharing that. So piggybacking off that and diving into the pandemic that we're all dealing with, can you talk a little bit about their experience? Like as students, what was it like for them?
It was a large adjustment, I feel like. I mean, as with anyone. But in a high poverty demographic, having to stay at home and away from school affects them more negatively than with those who have access and access to resources and money and not having to worry about a job being lost. I know that this pandemic and being out from the school for so long, for the rest of it was like 3 months, lost from school. And even though we were doing online teaching, the effects of those 3 months are probably going to be, we're probably going to be able to track the academic performance of this group of students for the rest of their lives. There's going to be ongoing studies, I'm sure, of the effects of this.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, and as far as what you were able to do as a teacher, can you maybe we dive into a little bit of that, dealing with these kind of kids that are working all the time, or maybe now stuck at home babysitting, or maybe working 2 jobs. Can you talk a little bit about what you think they were going through and what you did as a teacher to help them?
mm-hmm. Okay, so on my end, when we first got out, that was like March, mid-March, during spring break time. We had a couple of online lessons prepared, and that was good to go. When we first reached our extensions, like, we're actually going to go 1 more week after spring break before we come back, just to be safe. I was able to borrow some of my family members' camera setup and his computer setup, and I was able to stream some percussion lessons that I had put together. And I had like a whiteboard, everything, and so I could switch between cameras. I had a snare drum home, and I was able to stream quite a few lessons that way. And then we also had our Google Classroom. Pretty much all of my school went with Google Classroom as our digital platform.
Okay.
Now, with the students, we were getting pretty good engagement as far as student participation and feedback with our assignments at the start. But as time went on, that engagement dropped significantly. And it was difficult because you could probably group kids into 2 or 3 categories. We had and then this is especially true after the kids kind of realized that 4th quarter would be called do no harm, meaning 4th quarter their grade cannot lower. So there's
wide, right?
Yes, and that was a district-wide, actually statewide, I think.
Oh, statewide, that's right.
Yeah, that was a statewide decree. So we had the kids that already had A's, and a couple of them were doing work, but then when they realized that the grade couldn't go down, they vanished off the face of the earth. And it was difficult to get in contact with them. We had the kids who had good grades, but because they were good students, they continued to do the work. We had then also the kids who did not have a good grade, but school was not important to them and was not that important to their families, and so they just did not do the work. And then we had there's some in between where they did some work. They did just enough to maybe raise their grade by a letter grade or so. And from my interactions with a lot of the students, it didn't seem like they were too emotionally shaken by the pandemic. I don't think they necessarily realized the extent of what was happening. Just like, when 9/11 happened, I was a little kid. I didn't really understand the ramifications about what had happened. So with the kids, for our kiddos in the middle school level, I think they sort of understand, but maybe not so much. They were just like, I'm bored. I want to go back to school. From the ones that we could reach.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about that then. So I think what you're talking about was pretty nationwide, at least talking to my friends about it. What were you doing specifically to engage these students?
Okay, so we did all sorts. Whenever school was in session, the very first thing that we would try to do as far as reaching kids is through Google Classroom. Because before we had left for school, we made sure that every single one of our students were signed up to our Google Classrooms. And then also literally the next day after we got out from spring break, we drove around the city to make sure that every kid also had an instrument to practice.
And when you say that, not to interrupt, can you just say how many students that was, just so people know? I have an idea, but
Close to 300.
Yeah.
To something.
You were
But yes, it was a journey. All right. Before we left out, we told, okay, today's the last school day before spring break. Take your instruments home. It's going to be great. Take your instrument home. But of course, that's not 100%. So then afterwards, the next day, Mr. Coates, who is the head band director at Kimmons, we got together, we pulled out all the instruments that were left. There's probably about 30 instruments out of our program. That was a pretty good number. Mm-hmm. So we loaded up when we drove all around and delivered all the instruments to houses and everything. And that took a couple of days to get to everyone, but everyone had an instrument. So we had Google Classroom set up with practice assignments. We had our instruments. So we knew every kid had an instrument. So as we push out assignments, as kids return those assignments, that's one of the ways we documented our communications with them.
Okay.
If we were not getting assignments back, we would email students individually. If that didn't work, we started calling parents. And then my life became a whirlwind of calling and texting parents. On our district, we were told that we had to make some type of contact with the kid or their family every 2 weeks. So for all nearly 300 of our kids, every 2 weeks, we had to document some type of communication or an attempt at it. And so that was one way. When I streamed the percussion lessons, that was another way I could, communicate. We are big on social media. So for our band, we utilize Instagram and Facebook often to communicate with our parents. I would jump on Instagram Live occasionally just to try to check up on our students, see how they're doing emotionally, and academically, trying to contact students that way. What else? And out towards the very end of this school year, we started having home visits. So if there were students that we weren't able to contact, we would add their names to a list. And so our principal and our school resource officer and our assistant principal would make home visits to these kids, particularly the ones that were failing, which, they had like a failing grade to start off the fourth quarter and they weren't doing work. And so we did home visits. And so short of knocking down their door, we did a lot.
Yeah, you really hit the streets pretty much. And one thing I really like seeing, I follow your Instagram page all the time, and I forget the specifics, but it was something about you going on the day before and you would say, all right, guys, what are you working on? Just send me a video of anything that you're playing. And then the next day it would be like someone just like doing double bass drum, like rocking out, and then someone like playing trombone to like some marching band music. And you would just like flash up all these different things. And I thought that was
so yeah. Okay. So one of the things that, again, to try to get them playing, not necessarily even to do work, because sometimes work can feel like just busy work and a check mark that we had. And for our team, that's not our philosophy. Like, we want to cultivate a love for music and playing in our program. And so the north side of town, we developed some hashtags to try to get kids to showcase kind of what they were doing. So for the Kimmons, it was hashtag Kimmons Band Practice Jams. And so,
that's awesome.
So a lot of Kimmons, especially the alum of Kimmons, alumni, they did put a lot of videos together. A lot of times they did the a cappella app, and they were playing 4 different parts and putting them all together. And that was another way to try to get kids to keep playing. Doesn't matter what, as long as they're playing.
Yeah, I love that. I learned a lot. You know, I teach, as you know, and now stolen like so many different ideas from everyone around me. So anything that I do from now on that you see is just taken from somebody else. But it was just so cool to see all the social media posts and you getting on. And I really enjoyed watching all the all state and all region clinics that you were doing at the beginning, or like the technique stuff and things like that. So moving forward, and feel free to be as open as you want. What good came from this pandemic for you? Whether it's personal, maybe something happened to you, or as a teacher, what good came from this?
Well, on the teaching side, it really forced me to be creative in the ways that I can reach students, and it really pushed. I feel like if anyone who really loved teaching, this presented a huge challenge, and you had to step up to it. There was growth. It was a bit uncomfortable, but for me, I know that I'm going to be better prepared for fall if we're not going to be back in school. So the whole online teaching, while at first I was really kind of nervous about it, and to be honest, I still am, but I feel confident that, especially with the experience I've gained from the last few months of school, that I'll be able to do it again. And it's just hard, just because, you know, as music teacher, and I particularly work often with beginners, I'm just kind of, I worry about how am I gonna teach beginners not in person? How can I fix things if I'm not there with them? And I'm sure that's a question that a lot of people are nervous about. But from the experiences that I've had in the last few months of school, I know I'm going to be okay. Another thing on the teaching side, and this can be as good or bad, but in my opinion, it's good. But having to do online teaching and having that be the expectation and the, you know, so-called new norm, it really brought to light the issue of access and accessibility for low income and poverty families. And so that was a huge conversation for our district about, okay, if this is going to be what we're expecting of our teachers, how are we going to make this happen for our kids that don't have the same level of access to the resources? And our district had a huge push to help those kids who couldn't get internet. And I think probably as a society, we're probably going to need to figure out that answer on the national level too.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking about roles and how you're feeling, as a music educator, we have roles, whether it's to the students, to ourselves, or to the art form. How do you think the future looks for us as music educators? What is our purpose? What is our role in this pandemic, or just moving forward in general?
That's kind of hard. That's a big one. And not to say that I am a wise guru or anything, but, and I speak from the perspective as a public school teacher.
Of course.
I think, and you know, I believe that we are an integral part of a well-rounded education. I don't think that it is possible for education to be complete without music and the arts. And as an educator, I think it's important for us to be advocates more than ever, especially as school districts are choosing to either eliminate fine arts programs or allowing, and this is another question, tricky subject, but the school district saying, allowing kids to have the choice of doing digital learning or in person. And then that is going to definitely affect, how our band programs will work. But we need to be able to be advocates for our program, for our existence, because the kids need us too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people lose track of that or lose sight of how valuable our programs are. Sometimes we are the only thing and the only reason why a kid will come back to school. And sometimes we're the only reason why a kid will learn any math, because they want to stay in band still. Or, and I think it's our purpose. I think it should be our mission, of course, to be advocates for our program, to fight for our existence for the sake of our students now and moving forward. So even despite all the challenges that we are facing, and again, as a band director who works with beginners, even though that's going to be a challenge and it's probably going to put me in a situation where I'm not going to be so happy about it, but I'm going to be here and I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that that kid gets the best education that I can offer them. And so, yes, for purpose, to not give up. I think we have to keep going for the sake of our kiddos.
That's awesome. And I think just by doing that, like not giving up, and anytime there's like a challenge, we just stand up and meet it and surpass it. I think by doing that, we should show people that we are important, that you are important, that the students are important, that music is important. That's excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything that you want to talk about?
Well, just kind of on the same vein, and this isn't coming just from me, but from the old hats who've been doing this a long time. And I agree. I think it's so important for us, in order to be the best advocate that we can for our students and for our programs, is to find a way to have a seat at the table whenever big decisions are being made. And that always takes me back to Hamilton, the musical. I want to be in the room where it happens.
Yeah.
And try to find ways to show leadership on your campus, to get to know your administration. Don't see them as adversaries, but see them as allies. Even if you don't feel that way, they need to feel that way.
Yes.
And so, and for me, I'm in a fortunate situation where the Fort Smith School District is a huge advocate for the arts and for the extracurricular activities. And even my principal, even though he'll admit he doesn't know anything about music. He played trumpet and won for 1 year, and then he quit to run track.
Nice.
And so he'll admit it, but he is still an advocate for our programs, because we communicate, we take up leadership positions within the school itself, and we do what we can to keep ourselves relevant. And even though I'm just a fourth year teacher, but I feel like that is something that more people need to hear. So
yeah, that's excellent, Chris. Thank you. I really am excited for people to hear the perspective, especially someone so accomplished and so